And we're live, and this is a meeting of the Senate Agricultural Committee on Friday morning, January 15th. And we have Maddie Camper with us from NOFA and a group of her members. So we're going to hear from Maddie and some of her guests that she's brought along. So maybe the committee could introduce themselves so that people on the Zoom will put a name with a face. And Chris, are you still with us? So Brian or Anthony?
Go ahead, Anthony.
I'm Anthony Pauline. I represent Washington County.
Brian Collmore from the Rutland District.
Corey Parent from Franklin County.
And Chris Pearson is from Chittenden County, and he's the vice chair of our committee. And if you, I guess to get started, we've got a fairly large crew on, and I can't see everyone's face at the same time, but if you, Maddie will lead off, and then we'll call on you folks in an order. And if you have a question somewhere along the line, raise your hand and Linda will pick up on that, and she'll turn your voice box, your speaker back on so you can talk, and we'll call on you when we have that opportunity comes up. And we'll give it a whirl and see. A lot of committees don't let as many people in as we've been doing, but I think it's important that we have as many folks in a given subject area on as wants to be on, like we would do if we were in Montpelier holding our meetings. We usually let in as many in the room as will fit, and then the rest has to stand in the hallway and try to listen. But anyways, welcome to all of you. And Maddie, if you'd like to get started, we'll go.
Thank you, Senator Starr. And I just want to say really quickly before I pass it to Grace, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having this large crew on today. And I think it's just a great opportunity for us to queue up a lot of important issues early in the session. And I know it might be sort of an unusual session, but we really appreciate actually the opportunity that Zoom provides for us to bring more farmers into the room without them having to drive from far-flung parts of the state. So that's one benefit of our virtual world for sure. And appreciate you letting us take advantage of that. And I also just want to say it's really nice to be introduced to Senator Parent as a new member of the committee. And it's just great to be back in session with you all. So I was going to pass it over to Grace to do just an introduction of NOFA and sort of our work a little bit more broadly. And then I would love to, if possible, take back the mic for a minute after Grace to queue up some other issues.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Yes, I just want to echo Maddie's gratitude for having us here today. It's lovely to see many of you again and to meet you for the first time, Senator Parent, and so glad to have Ashlyn and Eric joining later, and appreciate the time together this morning. So I'm Grace Odell. I'm the Executive Director of NOFA Vermont, and I wanted to just super briefly share again our mission statement and the work that we do as an organization. We're coming up this year. 2021 is our 50th year as an organization, and we work statewide. We're a farming association. We represent almost 800 certified organic farms and around 1,100 members beyond that. We work on both the farmer support side of things and on the eater side of things to promote organic practices and organic food system that's economically viable, ecologically sound, and socially just. across the board. So we work, what are strategies we can implement that work for people, for the farmers, for those food producers, and for the eaters that tend our planet and that do all of those things in a way that is equitable and just. And I want to connect this to the sort of priorities that we're going to talk about this year. It is not lost on us. We are in the middle of a crisis. We're not out of the woods yet. And we see this time period as a really, really challenging, and also it has shed a lot of light on the ways in which our national food system is brittle and the ways in which our local and organic food system is strong, and the ways that when our farmers show up for our eaters, when we connect these supply chains, when we invest in our rural local economies, we are investing in a stronger future for Vermont. We are healing the planet while we do it. We are making this a place people want to live and move and raise their children. We are making our schools better. We are making the resilient system that we need. So all of these structures, all of the sort of program strategies that we're going to talk about today are not whole solutions, but they're small steps that we think are actionable now that will help move us towards that broader picture of resilience. Climate resilience, we've just experienced, we were talking in House Ag yesterday about the record-breaking droughts this year and the feed shortages those caused. We're going to see increasing climate and weather weirding patterns. And we need, our farmers are on the front lines of both mitigating those problems and working within their realities to keep us all fed. We're going to see increased food insecurity. We're just up against a lot. And at the same time, farming, agriculture, and thinking about our food system provides us a really excellent way to solve a lot of those problems at the same time. So again, we're going to talk about in sort of detail about specific ideas that we know are on the table. And we hope that we can move on this session, even in the middle of crisis, to position us to be in a better place on the other side of the crisis. So thanks for all that you're doing in that vein, and all that you have done. Last session was really just a marathon, and we are really appreciative of the ways that you showed up. So I'm going to pass it back to Maddie to talk more about the specifics.
Yeah, Grace, did you say that you have 800 farms that you work with, or 800 registered farms in the group?
We have close to 800. I would have to open up the current tally. It's in the upper 700s. Maddie, I don't know if you have the exact number on but those are our certified farms. So those are farms who actually go through Vermont Organic Farmer, the regulatory side of our organization, and get a certification that's backed by the USDA National Organic Program. We have a broader set. We have about 1,100 members, some of whom implement organic practices and some of whom have chosen, not to get certified organic for certain reasons, or they're allies, or they're not of the scale to be certified. So we represent a broader farmer group than just our certified farmers, but that number is about how many people are certified. I can dig that out while we're talking and put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Maddie?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I realized earlier that I neglected to actually introduce myself. Maddie Kempner, I'm the policy director at NOFA. And so a few issues I want to get into. I really want to leave the bulk of our time for our experts here on staff and our farmers to give their testimony, but I just wanted to queue up a few issues that we are tracking closely this session. And the first is a bill that was actually passed last session, that was H254, now Act 116, the Adequate Shelter Bill, or Adequate Shelter Law. And essentially this law requires that animals that are primarily maintained outdoors have consistent access to natural or built shelter. And that's one I really just want to flag for your committee. It seems to me that most of the testimony, if not all the testimony on that bill, was taken in House Ag, and not a lot of testimony was taken from grazers or from farmers. And I think that's a bill that I would love to see revisited this session, because essentially I think there's an unintended consequence of that bill. And a couple of our farmers, and maybe even Ashlyn would have something to add on this later, but there may be an unintended consequence of that, where people who are practicing really good progressive rotational grazing may not realistically have access for their animals to natural or built shelter in every paddock if they're moving their animals regularly. So that's just something I want to queue up for you and just let you know that we would love to bring some grazers in to testify on that, along with our partners at Rural Vermont and the Vermont Grass Farmers Association. So that's just an issue to flag that I would love to see taken back up this session. Secondly, and I know that Carrie's on the call to speak about something else, but I just want to flag that we are tracking potential changes that the Agency of Ag is working on to update the pesticide regulations. And we're really glad that that update is happening. We don't really have any details on that yet, but the pesticide regulations have not been updated since 1991. So we feel like that update is long overdue, and just want to also flag that as something that we're interested in working with this committee and with the agency on. And especially we're hoping to see that the pesticide regulations and also some changes that are being proposed or considered to the Vermont Pesticide Advisory Council, that both of those really move us in a direction of systems change away from reliance on agrochemicals. And we know, as a farming organization that works with, both certified organic and non-certified farmers, that it is not, it's not necessarily easy for farmers to transition wholesale away from agrochemicals overnight. We understand that it is a process of systems change that takes time, but we are concerned about the impacts of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers on the environment and on human health, and on worsening the impacts of climate change. And based on our experience working with certified organic and non-certified farmers who don't rely on these chemicals, we know that it is possible to transition away from them. So just want to have you think of us as a resource in that respect, and look forward to working with you all and the agency on both of those efforts.
And Maddie, do you have you reviewed the animal shelter bill so that you're prepared to bring suggestive changes to us, or is that something that will come in a couple of weeks or a month? Or
yeah, I think we're in conversation right now with some partners, farmers, and other organizations to try to develop some alternative language, because personally, I'm not a grazer and don't consider myself an expert on what's reasonable to expect of folks practicing rotational grazing. But I think, folks like Ashlyn and other farmers that we work with really would be the experts to be able to provide alternative language. But I think it is possible for sure, and we are working on it.
well, a lot of times we pass a bill like last year, and then once it's implemented, you find the second year where you need to make some alterations to that. So I think we'd be certainly willing to hear more about that and get that straightened up. But you want to stick with it, because we're supposed to have, hopefully, a shorter session this year than normal. So, we've got to stick with it, what we want to really get done, and not drag it on too long.
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate that point. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think hopefully it shouldn't be too difficult to fix. And I think, if you could get several farmers in all at once to give some testimony, and if we can provide some language sooner than later, hopefully we can get it fixed. But I just will also name that the way that the law is right now, I think puts grazers at certain risks in terms of having, uneven enforcement of that law, depending on how enforcement is carried out. And also based on, we work with some farmers who have longstanding issues with folks in their neighborhood who are, animal rights activists who don't necessarily also have a great understanding of good animal health and grazing practices. So we just really want to make sure that farmers are able to practice grazing in a way that makes sense for their farms, keeps their animals safe and healthy. And we don't want this law to get in the way of that. So.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just two other things I'll mention before we move on to the rest of the folks here. I just want to flag for you all that we are continuing to work with our coalition partners in seeking reforms to Act 164, previously S54, the Cannabis Tax and Regulate Bill. And our primary concerns with that bill, as you may know, are just that we don't feel like it's setting up an equitable marketplace for adult use cannabis from both a racial justice and agricultural perspective. And I think, honestly, the primary fix for that is for this bill to get taken back up and to have testimony from both farmers and cultivators in this committee, which I know that the legislature has been working on that for many years, and I really respect all the work that's gone into it. And I just think there's been a lack of real agricultural understanding and input into that process. So would love to see, I know there was a bill introduced by Senator Sears, S25, excuse me, that's being introduced in Senate Judiciary. And I would love to see that bill taken up by this committee. And lastly, I just want to frame, I know that Carrie is here to speak later on the food residuals bill, and I just want to share that we are certainly wanting to work in partnership and in coalition with our partners at rural Vermont in supporting that bill. I think that the practice of poultry foraging on compost is something that we really support, and something that is really beneficial both for the nutritional quality of the food that those farmers are producing and to the way that their businesses function. So just want to flag that as something that we support and hope to also work with you all and bring farmers in to testify on. And also just want to flag that Eric Paris, who's coming in later, is also going to testify on compost, but on a separate issue around just larger scale composting of manure and some ideas that we have for how that can be supported. So just want to sort of distinguish those two issues a little bit. And I think that's enough of me talking. And I would love to, if possible, pass it to Jen Miller, who just joined us. Thanks.
Okay. Did you say Jen?
She just joined, so she may not be on your first screen.
And if you start talking, you'll
there
probably
you
have
are.
the speaker.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. I was in the waiting room void for a while this morning, so thanks to whoever let me in. My name is Jen Miller. I run the Farmer Services Program here at NOFA. We provide business planning and technical assistance to farmers of all production types at all stages of business development across the state. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about farm viability. I'm going to try to keep it short because I'd rather listen to Ashlyn talk than myself. But the Farm Viability Program is core to our work. And I think most of you are familiar with that, but just quickly, it's a 2-year business planning program, business and transfer planning program. Spending a year, farmers work intensively with the primary business advisor for the first year, come up with a plan. The second year, they get continued support to implement the plan, update it, and improve it. You also a fair amount of money to get these farmers extra support from consultants, so additional expertise from marketing, QuickBooks, grazing, whatever else they need. And the other thing that's important to remember about this program is that it's respected nationally. It's a national model for how farmers can receive support and on their path to developing viable businesses or maintaining viable businesses. We have a coordinated effort statewide, and the connection between the service providers is, the working relationship is amazing, and we also get shared professional development services. So we here at NOFA, we're providing like 4 main types of services through the farm viability work that we do. One, which is the core, is just helping farmers develop core business plans, right? So, that might look like working with the dairy farmer, selling their herd, supporting their conversations with lenders, making sure that they're dealing with their capital gains taxes, and then helping them figuring out new enterprises so that farm can stay in business and that working land can stay a working land. We'd be working with a vegetable farm who's getting to high dollars per acre returns. They want to start a family. How do we do that and still maintain and grow our business and meet our quality of life goals, right? We also work with farmers on cash flow analysis and enterprise analysis. which could include things like, feasibility study. Like recently we did a project that was looking at a farm that wanted to diversify into a new value-added meat product and sell it in New York City, right? Is that a feasible endeavor? And what do they need in order to be successful? The fourth kind of service we offer through the Farm Viability Program is succession and transfer planning. So we're supporting both the exiting farmers and the incoming farmers. So that's, looks like a pretty complicated situation for case management, working to make sure that their attorneys, maybe the land trust is involved, their CPA, do they need production support, making sure all of those pieces are coming together and everyone's working towards the goal of figuring out how to transfer this farm to the next generation, right? A lot of that also entails making sure their financial house is in order so that we can have a viable business to continue into the next generation, or what does the next generation need to do in order to keep that farm in production? During that, we're also navigating pretty challenging family dynamics. And we've been working recently with a lot of incoming farmers on starting to plan their exit strategy from, essentially day one, so that we're not in an emergency situation. So I think just to sum it up, all these services I feel like are super critical to ensuring that Vermont has a strong agricultural economy in the future and that we preserve our working landscape. Especially everyone knows we don't need to go into like the state of the dairy industry, both conventional and organic. The number of farmers that are retiring the next 10 years, COVID response and recovery work, that's also been a critical part of our farm viability services. And I think that there's a diversity of challenges that we could sit here and talk about challenges that farmers encountered on their path to developing a viable farm business. Like whatever that means for them, we're meeting their business and quality of life goals. But in order to make sure that we can continue to do this, we need to hopefully at least at a minimum level fund VHC. But all of this work, the number of especially transfer plans that are needed right now, like we could really utilize an increased level of funding for VHCB's Farm Viability Program. So that's what I wanted to say. So I can turn it over to Ashlyn to speak a little bit from the farmer perspective.
Before we move on, Jen, we have heard from some of the agencies that shipped out money to farmers from our CARES Act that some farmers did not qualify for CARES Act funds because they didn't have decent bookkeeping systems to be able to verify that they had actual losses. And have you, in your work, have you run into that working with some farms or farmers, that issue about bookkeeping and having to give farmers more training on keeping up on that so it's more timely?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely a service that we offer. And I think the other thing to emphasize is that like I've encountered that mostly with a number of dairy farms that like we're working, it's a lot of extra effort to bring together their records. Some of it becomes pretty time intensive, and the hope is that we then connect them with whatever, like either I'm teaching them a more efficient way to keep their records and books. We might bring in Sarah Flack to do some production TA and record keeping TA so that they can, both have better business records and meet the organic standard need. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, especially for folks that didn't like come into it. They just continued on with their family's business and they kind of just do it the same way that it's always been done. And those farms are a heavy lift, but also super important to help with getting their house in order.
Yeah, and I mean, I was surprised when they said, well, some farmers didn't qualify because they couldn't show where they lost money, and that most of them had a pretty rough year. And so it's too bad there couldn't be some simple way to set up a simple system, but I guess there just isn't. I know, you work long days and then you got that hanging over your head and I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow, another catastrophe happens. And so, well, I'll get it tonight. And yeah. So anyways,
Yeah, I think, and it's important to remember too, like VHCB, the Farm Viability Program has been running for a large number of years, and there's still farmers that in the state that haven't done run through it. And so,
yeah, I hope this year, and Gus and Corsell is leaving, but they were all in yesterday and they said they could, do more with farm viability, and the demand is out there. So we gotta be sure and bump that up some this year. So I guess we have Ashlyn on next.
Yep, I'm here. Can you see
Yeah.
me?
There you are.
Hi. So I'm Ashlyn Bristol. I have a farm in Brattleboro, Vermont. It's a pasture-based diversified livestock farm. We have a small dairy and then meat enterprises that sort of fill out our business. We have a CSA that's about half of our business and a pretty hefty retail side that has expanded a lot this year. And we've been on our land for 5 years now. We were on leased land before, and we started working with Farm Viability when we purchased our property. So it was really good timing because it was this opportunity for us to expand, and we did not have the skill set at all to do that. We didn't have the technical skills, even though we thought we did at the time. We certainly didn't have the business skills. We are both, my husband and I are both first generation farmers that came to it with this huge romantic sense of what it would be, which I think a lot of first generation farmers do. You have this beautiful sense of connection you're going to have with the land and how easy it's going to be to sell your food because it's so good, and you don't really think about bookkeeping at all. And then you're in the middle of it going, oh my God, I have all these receipts and this is a nightmare. So
just to give you some assurance, I think we were all in that same position when we were in our early 20s. So
yeah. And I think a lot of people that come into farming are that way. It's part of what keeps you in love with it, even though it's a really challenging profession. And so we started interacting with Farm Viability, and we were really lucky to have Jen as our business advisor, who came in and immediately started asking us really hard questions about what we wanted the business to do and how we were actually going to get there, not just how we wanted and hoped we would get there. We worked with incredible technical advisors and consultants on marketing, and our business, after we worked with a marketing consultant, grew 100% the next year because we stopped being afraid of marketing and and really embraced what it meant to have a business and let people know exactly what it was that we had and what our appeal was. We worked with a consultant. I think Jen touched on how challenging family relationships can be in a farm business, and farming with your romantic partner and the person that you live with in a really high stress, time intensive business can be really challenging. And so we got support in that as our business grew, which was so instrumental in being good coworkers for each other and eventually hiring on labor and being good to them too. I wrote down such a long list. I'm going to have to page through my notebook to tell you how great Farm Viability was for us. And at the end of it, we got this business plan that made us incredibly competitive. I mean, I know it's in part that we built the business, but hand in hand with that was this business planning and the physical business plan that we got, that then we were able to apply for a working lands grant that we got, that let us build a community space and retail store that was finished just in time for COVID. That then our retail business increased 7-fold in a 3-month period, which then positioned us, I know exactly, which then positioned us to really say, okay, well, where can we go from here? What have we not even dreamed of? And how strategically do we get there in the next 10 years? So we have 4 times the labor hours that we did right now than we did a year ago. Our business increased from 100,000 gross last year to, well, 2019 to 2020, 250,000. We're seeing profitability for the first time. And I don't think any of it would have happened without farm viability really laying the foundation for us. And that's just my farm. I know that they work with lots and lots of farms. So that sort of magnified across the state is such a powerful, incredible program. I can't say enough good about it. I think if we hadn't enrolled in it, we would have kept sort of heavy homesteading. And instead we have a business that sustains us and sustains other people and that feeds a lot of people in our community.
And do you have any small veggies and fruits? Is that what you grow?
Nope, we're diversified livestock. We're on a hill farm that really can't grow anything else. We're accessing really marginal land under power lines too. We're growing food where nothing else can really be grown.
So it's just livestock?
Mm-hmm. So we have a small dairy.
How about the processing of, you sell meat?
Mm-hmm, we do.
And how about processing? Are you having problems getting your animals in to be processed, or how does that work?
Well, we would, but we're in part because we make plans early because of the training that we got with farm viability. We made a plan for our slaughter last June for 2021, and we booked in our slaughterhouse then. But right now they're not taking any new clients for 2021.
No, we've run into a real snag they're booking 22 now, into 22, and people are, they call us and, well, what can you do to help us? Well, it takes a while to revamp a facility to be able to do more. And so that's a real issue for some meat farmers, people growing beef and lamb and pig, pork. So you're lucky. Must be you had a good plan.
We had a good plan. We had a lot of good support.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions from committee members? No, well, thank Ashlyn.
You guys see our Senator
Next is
Collmore.
Bill.
I think Senator Collmore. Did you have a question?
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Grace. So, Ashlyn, I'm curious because you mentioned that you are a first-generation farmer, and I've always wondered about this. What was the biggest unanticipated challenge that the two of you faced, and how did NOFA sort of negotiate, help you negotiate through that challenge? Just kind of curious.
Well, I think there were 2, and NOFA really helped with one of them. We had a really hard time with land access, and that's a big, complex issue. But we also had a really hard time with technical skills. And the NOFA conference is amazing for that, getting technical support. When we first moved to our property, none of it was actual pasture. It was just overgrown with invasives, and we had no idea where to start. And so Farm Viability brought on a grazing consultant, helped us with our soil tests initially. There's so many things that you need to know how to do to be a farmer, and it's a little daunting at first. So that technical support piece was really key for us.
Well, obviously you overcame the challenges, so that's great.
We're getting there.
You're still, okay, thank you.
Always learning.
I'll just put in a plug. If you ever have a chance to have some Rebot Farm butter, you will never find better butter, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The stuff of dreams.
And again, where's your farmland?
We're in Brattleboro.
Oh, well, you're pretty far south. Yeah. They got some good land down there along the river.
We're not on that.
Okay, any other questions for Ashlyn? If not, is Bill up next?
Yep, that's me. Thanks, Senator Starr. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So my name is Bill Cavanaugh. I'm a farm business advisor at NOFA. I work on Jen's team, doing some of that really cool farm viability work that she just mentioned. Prior to coming to NOFA, though, I've worked for a number of years in the meat processing sector. So on livestock farms, doing on-farm butchery, working retail butchery, really closely with slaughterhouses. So one of the things I've been doing a lot of lately is just sort of talking to kind of the pinch point that we're seeing with slaughter and giving a little bit more perspective on that. And that was sort of the idea when Maddie asked me to join the call today, was just kind of give a little bit of an overview. And I'm sure, it sounds like you're all pretty familiar with where we're at. But just to kind of put a point on just how bad things are, I guess I would say. Senator Starr mentioned most slaughterhouses that I know of are booking for 2022 right now. I just spoke, so the Vermont Grass Farmers Association conference is happening right now. I was on a panel yesterday and I got a chance to speak with a couple different slaughter facility managers and owners, and a few of them are saying that basically if you're not already a 2020 customer, you won't get in for 2022. It's become a situation where slaughterhouses are really starting to sort of silo out, who their core customers are. And if you're not known to them, if you're not already sort of a known quantity, you're just never going to get booked to that slaughterhouse. And what we're seeing in a very interesting part of the conversation yesterday is that we're starting to see sort of a stratification of farms who have access to slaughter and farms who don't. And the farmers who have access to slaughter have the ability to scale. I mean, right now we're seeing, a big spike in demand for local meat, local food in general, but local meat specifically in this case. And, it's easy to say, okay, I'm gonna buy another 10 feeder pigs, or I'm gonna add to my beef herd when I know that I have access to slaughter. But if I don't have that, I'm as a farmer, I'm stuck in a rut. So that's sort of a real emerging issue, I would say. NOFA also works with a lot of beginning farmers, very early stage farmers. And, we have conversations a lot about different enterprises, and there are plenty of folks who are looking to grow organic veggies, and that's awesome. But, for people who are trying to get into like a pasture-based livestock operation, it's really hard to encourage that right now. You have to almost start all the way at the end and work your way back to see if it's even feasible. And that is something that we're seeing a lot of right now. I would say,
Bill, did you have this conversation with any slaughterhouse owners or managers? And if you did they indicate what would help them to be in a position where they could add more farmers? What we may do as to help them as a state or an area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had actually a lot of those conversations lately. I would say my one sort of really strong contact in the sector right now is Justin Sauerwein, who's at the Royal Butcher. He's a very awesome manager, and he's really sort of keyed into what his needs are. And I don't want to speak for him, but just generally, what I'm hearing is, to start a slaughterhouse and even to scale up a slaughterhouse is very expensive. We're not talking about cheap equipment at all. Even, something like a table costs $800. So access to capital, I think, low interest loans and things like that are huge. I also think that frequently we find ourselves in a situation where labor is an issue. It's a difficult job. It's a very specialized job. One of the things I heard from Justin yesterday that was interesting, and it's sort of bittersweet, but at the moment, finding good labor isn't too difficult because a lot of restaurant workers are out of work. And if you're a skilled chef, you're pretty good with a knife in your hand, you're pretty used to working around food, it's easy to sort of transition them in. So that's good for the slaughter sector. It's maybe not great overall when you think about some of the other implications there. But I think, having sort of some sort of an education component to sort of get people just a little more familiar with food safety, with knife skills, with the whole process, I think would be huge for folks. That is something totally aside from my work at NOFA, sort of wearing a different hat. I do teach at Vermont Technical College, the meat education program there. And it's been very cool. We have had some students go on and work in the slaughter facilities. We also have a lot of farmers, which is nice because farmers can sort of understand a little more about what they can do to make a slaughterhouse's life easier from a cutting perspective and how to work with them. So that's definitely, I think, an important thing that can be done. One other thing that we're seeing a lot of interest in right now is getting folks up and running with small state inspected cutting only facilities. So not necessarily a slaughter facility, but the idea being that you would send your animals to an inspected slaughterhouse. They would just be slaughtered, and then those carcasses would return to your facility or the smaller facility to be butchered into cuts. The idea being that releases some of the pressure on the slaughterhouse because they're not slaughtering and cutting, they're just slaughtering and moving them out the door. It's much quicker. It's a bit of a balancing act because slaughterhouses tend to make their money on the cutting side of things, but I think, the conversation is if they can start to really build efficiencies around really just moving animals through and then out, it's kind of a win-win. And there are some farmers in state that we're talking with right now. We actually have a small grant to do some of that work to help them get the HACCP plans, the food safety plans they need, and then to get up and running at their state inspection. So that's sort of like one emerging way to relieve that pressure. And then I would say the one other thing just to speak to on that is custom slaughter, is on-farm slaughter. We've seen a lot of that this year, a lot of interest in that because farmers just aren't able to get into slaughter. And the problem is you're tying up cash flow in an animal and you're hitting your margin because you're feeding an animal on into the future that you're unable to process for sale. So people are turning to some really great itinerant slaughterers, going into the custom butchery system. And I think that I'm not super up on the policy side of it, but I know that some of those laws are going to sunset in the near future. And I think, finding a way to keep that on the books would be huge. So that's basically my spiel. I mean, I'm happy to answer any specific questions. Again, I have a lot of these conversations all day long.
Well, maybe other committee members, Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Bill, welcome in. I think what we've heard already this year, and probably in many ways last year too, is Vermont needs some more slaughter facilities than we have. I'm wondering, because you mentioned you teach at Vermont Tech, is the lack of facilities in Vermont, does that impede the number of students that you get? In other words, are your classes pretty full, or could you stand to have more people come in and learn how to cut? Yeah,
I think those could always do more. Absolutely. I think that, our class makeup, just to give you an idea, is I would say almost it's probably 50% sort of interested hobbyists, and I would include farmers in that. None of those people are gonna go and make it into a career. Okay. And then 50% people who are looking to maybe actually, move forward into a career side of things. So I think, and again, what that is, what I do is it's, typically, they had been a week long, we're transitioning to more of like a weekend type thing. It's an overview. It's a good way to sort of get your hands on, get understanding of anatomy and cuts and food safety. But it's not anything like, an on-the-job training at a slaughterhouse. So some of the conversations I've had with people who run slaughter facilities is that, build on what I'm doing, give people a shot because they've at least sort of demonstrated, the interest and the motivation. But on the job training for something as complicated and as kind of heavy duty as slaughter is key.
Well,
so
you don't have.
When somebody finishes with the course that you teach, do they get jobs in Vermont, or do a lot of them have to leave Vermont because there just aren't enough jobs?
I think I'm trying to think of a few specific examples. I think in general, almost all the students that I teach are in Vermont, are Vermont residents, and the ones that do want jobs in the industry, unless they're looking to go into something very specific, into like some of the more higher end, like New York City retail type butcher shops, they're able to find jobs. Again, up until this, 2020, I guess I would say, the industry was desperate for folks. I mean, really desperate. And I think that's still the case, but the pressure's relieved somewhat just by, a really large willing workforce right now.
Anthony?
I thought we had heard the other day that there was a need for real facilities at VTC's processing program, that there were actually, in other words, the equipment wasn't there as it should be, and you relied on going out to private businesses in order to show people how to do the work. Is that the case? I mean, do we need to do something to improve the conditions at VTC in order to make it possible for people to go through the program better?
I think one of the things that is a really interesting possibility and a really exciting possibility is you look at some other programs out there. I'm thinking specifically SUNY Cobleskill and Penn State, where they actually have on-campus slaughter facilities. And they're not huge. They're not really commercial operations. What they are is sort of a pilot facility to get people really well educated in that realm. And I know I can certainly speak to SUNY Cobleskill that they've become basically a national program. There's a wait list to get in there because they're very unique. And I do think that may be something that could be really helpful for Vermont. And it also could, it could be a small, I would say semi-commercial operation for Vermont Tech. I would sort of refer you to maybe Molly Willard on that one, but I think that's an exciting possibility.
Do you know, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask you, but is there a ballpark as to what it would take to set something like that up? Are you talking about, $1 million or $100,000 or $50?
50
Yeah, I
bucks,
mean,
Senator Polina, that's it. I think it's like two. Sorry.
Oh, no, Grace, please.
No, I mean, I feel like I was just reading something that was saying really like a $2 million facility would be like kind of
State of the art.
Yeah, like that it's a significant chunk of change, which is why I think these investments. I mean, Bill, you can probably speak with more.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of how long's a piece of string, right? I mean, I think you can certainly do it on the cheaper end, but I think even the cheaper end, you're talking several $100,000, and the high end, there's literally no limit. So, I think to Grace's point, somewhere in the $1 million to $2 million range would be very state of the art, very high end. And obviously, you can always work that number down. One other thing, I'm sorry, I wanted to just touch on my notes really quick. There's a real challenge coming down the pipeline in Vermont on small ruminants. So slaughterhouses are really starting to focus on beef and pork. And what's happening is we're seeing sheep and goats and those sort of animals get left behind. And I think that, as we talk about new facilities in state, I think the idea of having a facility that could potentially be geared towards processing sheep and goats there's a real market potential there, just because it's slaughterhouses are getting out of that business entirely. I just spoke with someone yesterday who's basically giving that up. They're not geared toward it. They don't feel like they're making money. They want to focus on beef and pork. So
we're going to have Pat Moulton in from VTC later on, Anthony and the committee, to chat about the process that they're using. But it would seem to me if Cobleskill has a program that's up and running and they're overbooking or they can't keep up, why couldn't we at VTC pick up, in that same area and do slaughter? And, the state colleges are looking for new ways to generate more students and get people in. So I think that, that's a discussion that we need to have with Pat when she comes in.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah. Anything else, Bill?
No, I think I've said my piece, and I've hit on most of the big points, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Can I
thank
ask just briefly, when you talk about the need to do more with sheep and goats, is that because the slaughterhouse or the processor makes more money doing the bigger animals? Is that part of is that the reason? I mean, or is it just less of a market for sheep? I mean, why would that be?
It's a few things, and I think a slaughterhouse operator probably speak a little more articulately to it. But I think beef tends to be a big money maker, right? I mean, one slaughtered beef is typically carcass value is in the thousands of dollars. Pork is very quick and easy to do. So you've got it on one end, you've got a very pretty intense, but like high dollar value animal. On the other end, you've got a very quick and easy animal that you could just do, over and over and over again all day. But something like sheep, where you've got to take the hide off, they're very small, so your carcass weights are kind of low. There's not a huge market for sheep. It's kind of this like stuck in the middle, sort of forgotten child of the livestock industry sometimes. But obviously, for anyone who's grazing, sheep or goats, there has to be something at the end of that process. Even if you're a sheep dairy or goat dairy, being able to process animals is an important part of that business. So
Thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to Eric, is it? That's up next.
I don't think that Eric is on yet. He had farm chores this morning, so he was not gonna be able to be on, I think, until 10. So maybe what we could do is go to Helen and then come back to Eric once he's on, if that works for him.
No, that should work just fine. Morning, Helen.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all see and hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. My name's Helen Rortvet, and I'm the Farm to School and Food Access Programs Director at NOFA. And so we're going to be changing gears a little bit here, but I think it's a really great opportunity to demonstrate really the breadth of work that we do here at NOFA in terms of engaging with the food system. I have two items on my agenda to discuss, and if Eric does show up, I'm happy to cede my time to him because I'm sure his time is more limited. So we'll just see how much we can get through and then go from there. So the first thing I want to discuss and to demonstrate and share our support for is a renewed focus on the local purchasing incentive bill that you all considered last session, S273, I believe it was. And what that did was it was meant to establish an incentive, a financial incentive for schools to purchase more local food. And this all happened pre-COVID times. So if you can remember way back when, there was a good amount of discussion within this committee last session and with the agencies of agriculture and education and lots of folks, and of course the Vermont Farm to School Network and all of its various partners discussing how this bill may support schools in purchasing even more food from Vermont farmers. So we're very supportive of such a bill, and we understand that it may be introduced again this year. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds or into the details because we'd love to see kind of where you all land and what the bill language looks like again this year, but just expressing our significant support and enthusiasm for this bill. And just a little bit of additional context, you may know that this bill is modeled after programs in Michigan and Oregon and New York State that have all successfully implemented a financial incentive, have all resulted in increased local purchasing among schools in their own states. And notably, our neighbors in neighbors in New York were actually able to maintain a notable level of local purchasing in schools, even during the disruptions caused by the pandemic this past year. So not only does it have benefits in normal times, it was really enough of an incentive to keep folks focused on that goal during a really difficult time period. And we know that Vermont schools spend $15.5 million on food every year. And so we'd really love to see, and we really believe that this bill can ensure that more of that money stays right here at home and circulates within our own economy and benefits Vermont producers. So that's a really, really brief overview. I can stop right there because it does look like Eric has joined us. If anyone has any quick questions about that, I'm happy to answer now, or we can go back. Oh, Senator Starr, I think you're muted. It looks like you're asking a question though.
Yes, there we go. We're having that bill's being drafted right now. It may be already done.
Oh, great.
And but our draftsman is out for a bit for personal reasons.
Okay.
And so I would expect that will, we'll have that bill back next week sometime. And next week, I don't know, I think it is next Wednesday. I've got on the schedule all the kind of food people coming in, and you may want to come along too, Helen, if you're not on that list yet. But we're having them in to kind of kick the program off to a good start. And so I know money last year was the issue, and and I'm sure it'll probably be an issue again this year, but there's never a good time to spend a whole lot of money. So I think we've just got to push ahead and try to get it started, and then build on it from there. So next Wednesday we will be working on that, and that should be, you can check with Linda, but at 9 o'clock next Wednesday morning, that should be on the schedule, and we can send you an invitation so you can participate.
Great, excellent. Yeah, and I think many of my Vermont Farm to School Network colleagues will be there, and I'm really happy to hear that momentum and that progress on this initiative. So hopefully we'll be able to participate, and we just want to make sure that you all knew that NOFA was behind that bill as well. So great.
Very good. Any questions for Helen from the committee? If not, we'll move on to Eric.
Okay, thank you, Senator Starr. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So first of all, my name is Eric Paris. As you know, my wife and I run a certified organic dairy and beef operation. We have some vegetables and, of course, a composting operation in the town of Linden. I was raised on the farm that my wife and I have run now for, 30 something years. So we were a conventional dairy, and in 2003, we began the certification process, and we transitioned to certified organic dairy and beef farming, which is probably one of the best things, at least, that we ever did. And then in 2005, I recognized the need for compost on our farm after we went certified organic, because obviously we don't buy any or wouldn't use any synthetic fertilizers or purchased fertilizers or anything like that. So the more I looked into compost, the more sense it made. I'll try to keep a fairly long story short, but through a series of events and working with the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District and what was Highfields Institute at the time, we began, when we began our composting on the farm composting operation, we began accepting food scraps. And it started out very small. And the whole thing grew and grew and grew. So finally, today we've gone through a physical expansion of the composting facility, and we just now finished up a very nice ASP aerated static pile, which has a heat recovery unit in a building where we're actually drawing heat in through the compost. We're up to about 12 tons of food scraps a week at our composting facility, mostly from institutions, schools, hospitals, stores, restaurants throughout the Northeast Kingdom. And this was brought to me by Black Dirt Farm. So, so in my opinion, being a somewhat a veteran farmer, compost on a farm has many advantages over raw manure, but I would say, well, one of them is that you can spread the compost on pastures and it takes very little time. Finished compost is odorless and it takes very little time for it to break down. So you can spread compost on pastures and the animals will go in and eat it much faster than if you try to fertilize your pastures with raw manure. Secondly, you know, I realize that small and medium farms can have composting operations on them where it might be a little more of a challenge on larger farms, especially where liquid manure is used. But in, you know, there's much less problems and chances of runoff using compost. So over near Lake Champlain, I know there have been problems with phosphorus running into Lake Champlain. The chances of that happening using compost as a fertilizer are much less using compost because of it is more solid and it wouldn't create such a runoff situation, such a danger of a runoff situation. So in my farm composting operation, I feel like what I've done can be replicated quite easily on other farms. It doesn't take up a really large area. I can produce a lot of compost in a fairly small area. But what I would like to see, I guess, is this, if possible. In my opinion, since I have an on-farm composting operation where we use our own dairy manure and some horse manure and wood chip and obviously food scraps, I feel like the compost that I produce on my farm is an agricultural commodity. I know that perhaps it's not looked at as an agricultural commodity across the board, but I would like to see compost produced on a farm be considered an agricultural commodity. If we did this, then this might open a door for some cost share funding for composting facilities from like Natural Resources Conservation Service. And let's say this did transpire, I can see this as a double plus, because if a farm created an on-farm composting facility using NRCS cost sharing, you would have because if the farm also accepted food scraps, the farm would have to be certified, get a categorical certification from the Agency of Natural Resources. During that process, it would be looked at to make sure the soils were right and there wasn't a problem with runoff or a potential problem with runoff. So you would have a manure storage facility on the farm that had already been approved by the Agency of Natural Resources. And secondly, if you had replications of like my operation throughout the state in different counties, you would also have more places for food scraps to go for on-farm composting. In my opinion, composting food scraps is the best way to get rid of food scraps. We certainly don't want them in the landfill for lots of reasons. And when you turn the compost back into, when you turn the food scraps back into compost, you're creating a nice natural fertilizer that is sought after by, you know, farmers, gardeners, certified organic farmers, and you know, so there's a nice market for compost. So a farmer can use compost on their own farm, like I do, to raise vegetables or to grow hay or what have you. But it's also a chance for a farm to get some, you know, some other income, which is, you know, as we all know, comes in pretty handy sometimes.
Are you froze or are you done?
No, if anyone has any questions, I would like to answer them. I'm just looking down through my notes, and that's the basics of what I had to say.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting, Eric. We have Kerry Jaguar on the line. I think he's probably on there listening. But we worked on farm composting last year, where chickens could work it, and we're gonna work it again. We ran out of time last year because COVID hit and all heck broke loose, and so anyways, A&R they said they would extend out the date to allow some composting on farms, and so we're back onto that this year. I think we've got people, I think we're gonna work on that next Thursday. We're gonna be working on we call it the chicken bill, but it's really composting and chickens and all that on farms. And could you tell us a little more about like your site where you do your composting and how you turn it and do all those things? How much is involved? If it's in on a slab, is it packed gravel? How do you do that, Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Starr. I'd be glad to explain. So we started off for many years just on a packed gravel slab. We put down a base. We put some road fabric over the portion of the pad that would be the heaviest travel, and then we put more gravel down so it wouldn't get muddy. It's an area on our farm that's roadside. So for easy access for our food scrap trucks and, wood chip trucks and different things. And, this could be, what I did initially can be easily replicated on basically any farm because I had but one tool that I used. It was a tractor with a loader. So I would make my windrows and I would allow enough space in between the windrows to go in with the tractor and the loader and to turn the piles periodically when temperatures told me that it was time to turn the piles. And I did that for a lot of years until I started experiencing some growing pains. We did actually increase the size of the composting at one time, but it was just bringing it towards the road a little closer. So I didn't use up any more of my fields. The compost is located in a nice, fairly flat field that I have close to the road, and it only takes up about 2 acres. As we grew, I didn't want to increase the size of the pad itself. So that's when we installed an aerated static pile. With the conventionally turned windrows, I was hindered by how much room I had because, as I said, I had to have enough room in between the windrows to access it with a tractor sideways and turn the piles. So that's why we installed, with the help of AgriLab, and also I have to add that we got 2 grants to install the aerated static pile, one from the Clean Energy Development Fund, and the other actually came from the Vermont Department of Agriculture through Rob Achilles. So had it not been for that help, I never could have afforded to do that on my own. But with the aerated static pile, I can produce compost at about 100% faster than I did with the conventionally turned windrows. And I don't need to turn them with a tractor. The air is drawn. We create the windrow over aeration pipes in bays that look a lot like small trench silos. They have a cement bottom and cement sides. And the air is drawn through the compost, or it can be a positive system where it's blown through the compost. Mine is drawn through the compost, and that speeds up the composting by 100%. And I do want to add that we ran out of time this fall, and so we had to quit. We got the aerated static pile installed, but what we also did is we installed some underground insulated piping to 2 locations on the site, but off to the side, and those carry piping so that in the spring, we're going to erect a garage and a greenhouse inside the shed at the composting facility. I have a heat recovery unit. So when the air comes into when the heat from the compost enters the shed, it goes to the heat recovery unit, and that will heat glycol and water, which will be pumped to 2 cement slabs, one for a garage/shop and the other at a greenhouse. So you can capture, with a system like mine, you can actually capture the heat and use it to heat, any number of things. You could use it to heat water if you wanted to, but you could use it to heat buildings through radiant heat as well. So there's just really, the way that composting situations are set up are very, very wide. They can be very, very simple operations using just a tractor, or you can have a complex heat recovery system, like I do. So there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah. I think the committee can pick up on this. Didn't we talked about having the tonnage at, what, 2,000 yards, wasn't it?
2,000 cubic
budget.
yards, 2,000 cubic yards a year. Yeah.
2,000 yards, and that isn't very much, like compared to your operation that gets 12 ton a week. Is that
Right.
what you?
I
Yeah.
am, I have a categorical certification with A&R, and I'm permitted to receive, I believe, a total of a cap of 980 wet tons of food scraps per year. Now, again, I use most of it on my farming operation, but the food scraps are also mixed with about an equivalent amount of dairy manure, horse manure, and wood chip.
So your total, see, I think we had 2,000 tons a year. So, and you got 980?
I'm not at that now. That 980, I believe, would be an equivalent of 16 tons average per week. Right now, I'm at about 12 tons average per week. So I have some flex.
Yeah. See, we were thinking of doing this so that we could have some small scale composting on farms scattered around the state. So we don't have to pay truckers to haul it to New Hampshire or way the heck off. And, you know, we're supposed to be working towards an environmentally friendly place. And so, you know, we make people keep their food scraps out of the landfills to save space there. Then now we're to the point where we have to load it on trucks and ship it out of state to a landfill there. And it would be much better if, you know, if we had a system where we had maybe a half a dozen or a dozen small composters that could take care of this. But anyways, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've been listening, even if I've been off camera. A lot going on today for me. My kids are home from school. Eric, I've been listening closely to what you're saying, and it's really helpful because we sort of started out, as the chair mentioned, trying to fix this particular issue with chickens. And I, for one, have wanted to see it as a piece of diversification, as an option for farms, and as an option to help the state manage food scraps. As the chair referenced, we truck a bunch of them to Maine to be incinerated. I mean, this is just ridiculous. So yeah. But I'd love to get your expertise on the quantity and the volume, because it's very hard for me to picture well, I guess I can picture a cubic yard. But beyond that, I get a little out of my comfort zone. So I believe our draft was 2,000 cubic yards. Can anyone nod and confirm that?
That's right.
Yeah.
But then we've been talking about tons. So 2,000 cubic yards was a delineation that A&R already had as the small, the way they permit very small producers. And, you know, they're uncomfortable, frankly, with us taking it out of their jurisdiction. But we wanted to say, as you've said, this really is farming, but will allow A&R, we can kind of agree that there is a threshold question. So my question to you is, it sounds like you've been through A&R for your composting. What we hear from farmers is that that's a big pain. So first of all, is that a big pain?
No, it isn't. It's far from a big pain, and I don't know why that would be said, because you know, they were talking 2005, so it's been a while. I remember somebody, it might have been Ben Gothier, it might have been Josh Kelly, I cannot remember. Someone came out and looked at my site, kind of went over what we wanted to do. There might have been a little paperwork involved. I don't know, maybe, I can't remember. If it'd been a real pain, I certainly would remember. But since I don't think it was a big deal. Now yearly, I get a form in the mail, or actually it comes online now. I get a form from A&R, and it takes me literally 30 seconds to fill out. It's like how many I don't know if it's tons of yardage, but how many food scraps did you accept in 2020? How many tons of manure did you use? How many cubic yards of wood chip did you use? What other inputs did you use? And that's basically it. And it's a very smooth process because, we're all, A&R and the farmer, we're all working in the same direction. So if there's a lot of conflict, yeah, okay, but there's not. We're all working in the same direction. And as Senator Starr pointed out, it is, I agree, it's ridiculous to be hauling food scraps out of state to go in a landfill. I mean, come on. I mean, we can do better than that. And it's really simple I think there's, to be honest with you, I think there's maybe some misconceptions or lack of education across the agriculture industry about what it takes to set up a composting operation or the science behind composting itself. It's not rocket science. Yes, you have to have, a certain, recipe, if you will, dialed in, and so that it doesn't there's not too much compaction, too much fluff. But, farmers deal with far more complicated issues when it comes to a dairy herd itself. I mean, composting is a walk in the park compared to managing a dairy herd. Believe me, I know. So, and again, this can be easily replicated on almost any dairy farm in Vermont that has, I would think that any farm would have a place to set up a composting facility. But I strongly support your efforts to keep the food waste in state, because it's just a win-win-win situation all the way around. My food waste generators save money on their trash bills because the heaviest component has been removed. You're saving money by not hauling the food scraps off. You're keeping them local, so we can use the food scraps to create soils to be used locally. The farmer picks up a few extra dollars by selling the compost, on and on and on. But it makes all the sense in the world to work in the direction that you folks are working in.
Well, if it's a win-win-win, you can be assured state government will take a while to get there.
Well, screw it up.
I won't say a word.
Let me ask you then, what as I'm listening to you talk, I'm wondering, again, we've been trying to push it in the small scale to ag, and then leave A&R in charge of anything of a more significant scale. So it sounds like you're probably under what, I forget their terminology, but the medium permit that A&R has.
It might even be small. It might even be a small or medium. It's definitely not large.
As you said, we need some education, and to me that means we need to make it easy for farmers to try.
Yes.
If we put up a bunch of roadblocks out of the gate, no one's going to try because they got enough going on. So does that make sense that we would try at a very small scale, kind of a permission way to go? If you're on farm, you can do this with minimal intersection with state government. And then when you scale up, we're going to have to make sure that you're away from water sources, extra, blah, blah, blah. Is that a decent strategy to your mind?
Yeah, two things come to mind. Yes, that is a decent strategy. I think the pluses to food scrap composting have to be pointed out because both monetary wise, I get a small tipping fee for when the food scraps arrive at my place. I get a small, like it's $25, $30 a ton tipping fee that I get. And of course, I use most of the compost on my own farm, but I also sell some. So there's a monetary advantage for the farmers as well. And that always got my attention. It probably would everyone's. And yeah, some sort, and I don't begin to have the answer to this, but some sort of a educational program of some sort saying, okay, this is really all that has to do for you to qualify under A&R. And once you do, this is what you can do to set up a simple composting operation. And again, I'll go back to this is a big if, but if a farm composting operation could be viewed as a manure storage facility, and in all rights, it is on my farm. then that perhaps, funding is always a big issue. And if like 75% cost share could be picked up through Natural Resources Conservation Service to lessen the blow to the farmer, that would certainly be appealing as well. So I think education in terms of certification, structure of site, and financing.
That's
So-
another reason to define it under agriculture, right?
Correct.
So what about, we also have in our bill that 50% of the compost has to be utilized on the farm. Is that number good or?
That's a good number, because I would think that any farmer would want to use at least 50% on their operation because of the many advantages that I won't get into. But and that opens up the door for 50% or 49% or whatever you want to call it to be able to be sold. And I get the low end of the scale. I get $65 a cubic yard for my compost picked up at the site, and I can and do deliver some within a reasonable range. So last year, without even trying, I sold 150 cubic yards. And it's and between the tipping fees and the compost sales, it might be looked at like a supplemental farm income, a lot like maple sugaring is on a lot of farms. It's substantial. It's not, you're not going to make a living. It's not going to be the saving grace of some farms, but it's enough to make a difference.
And how about the nutrients in that compost? Have you had it tested so you could say what kind of nutrients are there?
I have had it tested. I can't remember the numbers, but I can tell you that in nutrient value, it far exceeds raw manure.
Yeah.
Because
far exceeds.
Obviously because of the food waste nutrients.
So it'd be good like for corn and
Yeah.
and grasses, any of that. And very little runoff, you said?
Little or no runoff. When compost is done correctly, it's really quite dry, and and it's odorless. So it has a lot of advantages. You can compost is better for corn ground because of the nitrogen value of it.
Yeah.
And it's nutrient dense. So you can, again, like I said before, you can use it on pastures or your hay fields. And another thing about compost is, when it's done correctly, when it's finished compost, you can spread it right. The odor thing is under control. You can spread it beside someone's house if you have a field that's close to someone's house or whatever. I don't know, but it's odorless. So you don't get the odor, you don't get the odor of manure.
What about when you're turning the product to make the compost? Is there odors that you have a problem with?
There are odors, but it's the equivalent of opening up a manure pile in the springtime. A conventional manure pile in the springtime. I'm not going to say that, there are odors, but it's not. I have houses fairly close to my composting facility, and Caledonia County State Regional Airport is directly across the road from it. And I have yet to have even one complaint about odor. There's a little odor, but it's really, it's not much. It's not much. And even with my aerated static pile, I have an exhaust that exhausts the heat and the steam out of the building. And if you're standing close to it, you can smell it. But I can tell you that it's far less aromatic than especially liquid manure. But I know that fields that have been spread with manure give off a far stronger odor than turning a compost pile.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric. Are there other questions from the committee members? Are we ready to move on? I don't see any hands up.
Senator Starr, could I just pipe in here one more time? First,
sure. We still got, I don't know, 5 more minutes or whatever.
Okay, great. I just want to pipe in and first of all say that I am very into this compost nerdery that's happening. I really appreciate all your interest in compost, and I share it greatly. And thank you so much, Eric, for everything you shared. I also just want to add one more piece of context to this conversation, which is that composting is just an incredibly foundational practice done on organic farms and also non-certified farms, using organic practices, and has been for a very long time. So just want to emphasize the point that this really should be considered an agricultural practice, widely encouraged and allowed. And I do think that the conversation about, how this is regulated at different scales makes a lot of sense. And we would be happy to bring in more farmers of different scales who could talk about the ins and outs of this. And just one other element to add is, the climate benefits. I think that there are potentially huge benefits in terms of carbon sequestration, of properly utilizing, making, and applying compost on farms. And so that's just another reason to incentivize this practice. And just want to say one more time, I think I've shared this with a few of you maybe on the committee, but California has a program that I think is worth looking into that's called the Alternative Manure Management Program that essentially provides grants and technical assistance to support producers in transitioning to practices like compost for managing their manure, as well as support for transitioning to pasture-based systems. So I just think that example is one that Vermont could learn from and consider as a way to incentivize this further.
Yeah, and next, I think next Thursday, I think I mentioned it earlier, but we're gonna talk about, we call it the chicken bill, but it's really the composting bill. And, you guys, NOFA's on the schedule to be invited, but you might, I don't know if it's too early to bring Eric back in, but Peter Walk from A&R is going to be there. And, we're going to try to get this thing worked out so we can get going with this coming year. So, you guys can talk about it, and, if Eric had time, but you folks are going to be invited back for that.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And then I would love if we just have a couple more minutes since Helen's still here. There was one other point that I think Helen wanted to touch on, and if that's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, and again, switching gears somewhat considerably again, putting on my food access programs hat here. We just wanted to fill you in on what's going on with what's the state of our farm share program this year. And you may be aware of this program or maybe not.
What's the name?
What's the name of the program?
Yes.
It's the Farm Share Program.
Farm Share, okay.
Yes. So NOFA has been running the Farm Share Program now for 27 years. And essentially it provides a half cost CSA share to low income Vermonters, while through fundraising and other efforts, we farmers are able to receive the full cost of the share. So it's, again, a win-win. So I'm afraid that is gonna run into some roadblocks, it sounds like. But it really is a wonderful program that not only supports low-income Vermonters to have access to fresh and healthy produce, but also supports our really hardworking CSA farmers in receiving the full cost of the share to support and to feed those neighbors. The program is set up in a way that a lot of the farms are able to accept Three Squares Vermont benefits and or payment plans for the low-income participants of the Farm Share Program that are able to pay their share, their half of the share in a manner that works for them. So this program has been running for a number of years, and as you might imagine, it was really disrupted last year by the pandemic. And at the same time, we saw just unprecedented demand for the program. It's no secret that food insecurity is on the rise and probably will persist for quite a long time, even after we move out of the emergency phase of the pandemic. So we luckily were able to receive a sub-grant from the food bank last year to be able to support this program through CARES Act funds. And we saw the demand more than double for the program. We were able to serve almost 400 families as opposed to a little over 200 families, or just under 200 families the year before. So there's a significant demand for this program. And we just are concerned about the viability of it moving forward, as our main fundraising mechanism had been to partner with restaurants. And we know the restaurants are really hurting this year, and certainly were last year. So we're just trying to think creatively about what are some other mechanisms, what are some other ways that we can support this program and ensure not only that low-income Vermonters have access to CSA shares, but also we're able to extend the full cost to the farmers themselves. So, yeah, we're interested in exploring perhaps an appropriation, exploring other ways that this committee could support the farm share program. We really see it as both an economic recovery program, something that benefits both the eaters and the farmers themselves. So,
yeah, the program that we have where restaurants put meals out for people. Yesterday we spent quite a lot of time on that, and I know we're gonna extend that program. I was just looking in my notes to see if I could quickly find the amount of money that we're gonna put back into that to keep that program going through December, to pay through December and move into the first part of this year. But I think the legislature, the Senate, anyways, I'm talking about, we have very strong feelings about making sure everyone eats, that there's ample food, and I know part of our job in the Ag Committee is to help strengthen, local foods, food security for our citizens, and so, if you hear us making a misstep on any of that, feel free to let us know, because it's certainly not our intentions, and I know we're going to put quite a lot of money back into feeding people.
Great.
So you did that last year through the food bank?
Yeah, we worked with the food bank as a sub-grantee. So they were allocated a decent amount of funding through the CARES Act, and then they sub-granted to many of their partner food shelves around the state, and then also to NOFA to support the expansion of the farm share program, because it was really identified as a program that can meet people where they're at and meet the needs of families that are interested in participating in CSAs, but for whom the cost of the full share is the only barrier. So, we really are hopeful that we can maintain the level of funding and support for the program that we had last year, because we think the demand is going to be the same, if not higher, this year. And certainly the need for those families who've been participating is not going to go away anytime soon. So.
Yeah, Anthony?
It makes me wonder whether what we need is for you folks or someone to put together kind of like a menu of the different programs that we should be funding.
Yeah.
Because we've got the farm share one, we've got the one where the restaurants are feeding people with local food, which I don't remember what that one is called. Yeah. And we have this other one where somebody, the Center for Community, the one up in Hardwick, the Senator for Agriculture, whatever, I'm forgetting what it's called.
Yeah,
Center for Agricultural Economy is taking over some trucks and is doing some deliveries, and there's just a lot of that stuff going around. And I I almost feel like I need to see a list of
Yeah.
what they are so we can decide how we look at how we might want to fund.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank
So if you folks could do that, and not anything formal, but just like send us an email or something that says, here's a list of what you should know about these not what you should know, what these programs are, which is which, and which
We
ones
can-
you'd like to see better funded.
We can
Yeah.
certainly do that, Senator Polina. And I will say we work closely with all those organizations who are working on, collaborative and complementary efforts. And there also are, I think it would be helpful for us to share, for example, how the Farm to School Grants Program interacts with and supports the
Right.
Vermont Food for Vermont Kids, the incentive bill. So yes, we can definitely do a little bit of a synopsis for you.
And then last year we were asked to further fund a program out of the food bank, which had to do with Vermonters feeding in
Yeah.
Vermont. It's just like they all sound the
Yeah.
same, and
right.
it's
Yes.
nice to know what they actually are.
Yeah, they do all sound the same and serve similar purposes, but different groups and their different strategies. And like Maddie said, we are working together closely with all those partners. And I agree, it can kind of feel like alphabet soup if we're throwing acronyms and program names at you. So it'd be
Well,
helpful.
it's kind of like what Senator Starr said about, we might end up missing something just because it sort of falls off the list and we think
Yeah.
we funded it, but we didn't because it sounded like the other thing we funded.
Right, exactly. Certainly. So we'll make sure to work with our partners and get that real clear for you all.
Thanks.
That would be helpful. Are there other questions from the committee members? We're getting near time where Carrie's going to be coming in and taking part. We got, if there are none from the committee members, Maddie or Grace, do you have any closing remarks? If not,
No, just thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and letting us cover such a broad range of issues. And I just really appreciate how engaged and interested all of you are in these issues and working on them with us. So thank you again.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you and all of your folks. You've given us an hour and a half, hour, almost 2 hours of your time too. So we certainly value your time and appreciate your willingness to be with us. So I think if no one has anything else, we'll get ready for our next witness at 10:45.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much
Bye.
for your time. And thanks, Ashlyn and Eric, for joining too. Thanks, senators.
Yes.
Thank you.
So committee, we have Carrie coming in at 10:45. So if you want to get a glass of water or whatever, we've got about 5 minutes in between. Carrie's already with us. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, Carrie.
Very good.
It's going on. It's still on.
Bobby, you're not
I guess we got Brian back and Carrie and Senator Parent. I don't know if Linda's back. I'm supposed to.
There we go.
Yeah. Are you on, Linda?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've got just about a half hour to hear from Carrie. And have you been on most of the morning, Carrie, or did you?
Yes, I have.
So you,
And I heard Eric talking about his operation.
yeah. And see, so we had you on in regards to food composting.
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
I know we
And-
don't have a bill number yet, but I think it's all right. It's very similar to the bill that almost made it to the finish line last year.
Right. And are you familiar with Eric's operation over in London?
I know about it. I've never been there.
Yeah.
I've never been there. I've been to a few of the operations, both sort of the Foster's Moodoo, and then the Blue Spruce has also got compost where they take out what comes out of the digester, compost that, turn that into a soil amendment, and then also, Carl Hammer's Vermont Compost. I've toured that operation as well as a few of the other compost facilities in the state.
So what are the differences between what Blue Spruce, Vermont, I think it's Vermont Compost down in Rutland, Foster's, Carl's, what's the difference between their operations and the bill that we're working on? Are there major differences? Why are we having so much problem or so many problems trying to get the deal going like up in Standard and these other composters?
So primarily it's the post-consumer food scrap issue, not so much the food scraps that come from food processing, but the stuff that's seen a plate that's classified differently. That's
Isn't Eric's operation, he said he takes food scraps.
He does, yep, and he's permitted by A&R.
And he said it was fairly simple. He said 30 seconds here, a few minutes, he can fill out the annual application and move forward.
Yep, I did hear that as well. Let's I don't know if we still do this in this form or fashion, but especially because it's not taped, but I'll go ahead and say I'm Carrie Jaguar from the Agency of Agriculture, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what's proposed in the bill that you guys have put together with regard to chickens and compost and food scraps. Part of that bill that creates a residuals management program at the agency, I'd kind of propose that get fleshed out a little bit. If we are really going to manage residuals, on farms, I think there's a few things that we'd like to sort of deal with regard to some of the wastes that do come on farms. The food scraps are easy. It's the plastics that I think are worth managing under a residuals management program, as well as some of the other wastes that may or may not come on the farm as soil amendments and contain the PFAS compounds. Right now, those soil amendments are largely unregulated. And I think my proposal, sort of in order to create that residuals management program, would be to register soil amendments. And this gets to what Eric was talking about calling these an ag commodity. We would register soil amendments similar to how we register fertilizers. Right now, the folks producing compost have both registered fertilizers and soil amendments as their products. This would just catch all of them in that registration fee. And what that does is provide us an opportunity to check and see if those are adulterated with these other chemistries that we don't want to see make it onto the landscape. If they're a fertilizer, we can check right now. If they're a soil amendment, we've got no authority to call them adulterated. And I think creating the residuals management program would allow us to do that. And also, the piece of this that A&R holds on to is, yes, the waste food makes it to farms, but we don't want to see that too much plastic contamination or other adulterants in there.
Well, don't these, why shouldn't that burden be on whoever picks this up, rejecting it if there is foreign objects in the food scraps?
It probably should, but right now there's really no regulatory oversight when that makes it to a farm. So some of our composters do receive material, especially if you're picking it up from a school senator, straws, and it's the level of training that needs to occur from the person accepting the waste. But you've heard testimony last session about the depackers, and so the food waste will go into an automated system that removes the packaging, and the amount of plastic contamination is not necessarily none. So the packaging, yep.
We heard that in regards to supermarkets throwing out outdated meats where they throw everything in the right in with the meat, and but that should be regulated right at the store, that if they're going to discard meat products that are outdated, that they have to be removed from the container or the carton.
Yeah, I agree. But right now it's being managed as a waste, not as an agricultural input. And I think the tolerance for the amount of plastic in there is slightly different. If you're managing it as a waste, the tolerance for plastic in there would be significantly different than if the understanding is that this is an agricultural input. If that makes any sense at all. It's sort of where we are also with some of the products that are being sold as soil amendments that are Class A biosolids. Senator Pearson, sorry.
Yeah, Chris?
No, I don't mean to cut you off. I was excited when you and folks from the agency had the parade of programs coming through, I guess it was Tuesday. And particularly gratified to hear Ryan talking about the soil, ecosystem services and all the work around building healthy soils. That is exactly what we're talking about here. And so I mean, if state government wants to, on one hand, have us figure out how to invest in healthy soils and paying farmers for producing healthy soils, also telling people you must compost your food scraps, and then you have the two agencies not being able to basically figure out how. We've got a right hand, left hand issue here, and I guess I'd like to ask, like, what do we do? Do we buy you a socially distant weekend with your counterparts at A&R and tell us how to figure this out? Like, we shouldn't have to figure this out. People need to come and tell us how to do it. We're going to explain a goal, which is we would like compost to be considered in a small scale, a diversified ag product. The state has already said, thou shalt compost. The regulators need to figure out how this meshes together, because basically this is now the third year I've been involved talking about this, and it's the same excuses. And I'm not laying this on you, Carrie, but on the whole, the folks have to figure this out. And if you don't, we will do a bad job of trying to push it through. So, I mean, I'm happy to repeat this to A&R, but I guess I'd like to ask for your advice on how we make that conversation happen, because it's long overdue, and it's not acceptable to only point out the ways the bureaucracy has not yet figured this out. What we're trying to do is figure it out.
Well, and we could add on to that statement that, if you guys don't want to participate and can't do it, we'll do it. And you'll probably not like our way half as much as you could do it yourselves and have it in a way that you kind of snarl a little bit, but you can manage it. And because, as Chris was pointing out, we've been told to move forward on soil health and all these things from our leadership and bosses, and we're gonna do it. And so we need, like you, Carrie, and Peter, I believe, over at A&R, to come to us hand in hand and say, hey, if you do it, please do it this way, and offer us direction and to get the job done, because we're going to get it done. We're not going to spend another year chewing over this and be right back next year doing it again.
I'm sorry, Senator, if I wasn't clear. It felt like that's what I was doing here. Is I wasn't telling you why we couldn't do it. I was explaining to the committee how we could do it, what we need, and what I think are the other things that we should catch in this net. And to continue that, I guess there are wastes that are sold as soil amendments currently. And those soil amendments aren't sold as fertilizers. They're just sold as soil amendments, and they're not regulated. And those are short paper fibers, Class A biosolids, and wood ash. And were we to create this residuals management program and register those as products, we would be able to test those for adulterants like the PFAS chemicals. Senator Pearson, is this tying it all together? So it would be a residuals management program where these societies' wastes could make it onto ag land without turning the ag land into landfills. That's sort of what we're trying to accomplish here, because it's a great idea, but there's a few sort of bumpers that we should put in place. Not hurdles, but we don't want to see plastic on our ag fields. We don't want to see the PFAS chemicals. We don't want to see heavy metal contamination. We want to do this in a responsible way.
Yep.
The difference between the Agency of Agriculture and the Agency of Natural Resources is we have different ideas about what contaminant levels are acceptable. The Agency of Natural Resources uses a dermal number for PFAS in soils, or a drinking water standard when the chemicals move off site. Right now, there's not a number that says this is safe for crops to be grown and this is safe for feed to be grown. And these agronomic numbers are not how these chemicals are regulated. And I'd like to incorporate that in. So we have some questions about what's safe for agriculture when you're using these wastes on land.
Is that something that you're gonna take to A&R to try to reach some satisfactory numbers? One thing that's happening right now, not here in Vermont, I haven't heard of it happening in Vermont, but I do know over in Maine where they allowed municipal waste that had settled in their waste treatment plants, ruining good agricultural land and contaminated it so bad that even the animals eating the hay off the fields got into trouble. So we certainly don't want anything like that happening here. So is this something, Gary, that you can work with A&R on to come with some good numbers, a good set of rules and regs on?
Yep, and it's up to you folks where you wanna house that, in what agency. We are working closely with the Agency of Natural Resources with regard to where they have permitted those land applications, and with testing. This is kind of off topic, and we tried to get it in a bill last year, and it might be appropriate in this bill. But one of the rules or laws in Maine is that when a farm is being sampled, they still receive a milk check. We've ran into a situation in Vermont where we wanted to test some milk for the PFAS chemicals, and the co-op basically was going to stop taking milk until we cleared that sample. So they, even though there was not a level of concern, the co-op was not going to take milk from that farm until the sampling process was done. So there is a law in Maine and New Hampshire where those farmers need to continue to receive their milk check while that sampling is being done. It doesn't exist here. So before we go out and sample broad scale, we would like something similar in place.
So who's in charge of that, EB or somebody over there in the dairy division?
No, that would that's in my division that we're working on, but we do work closely with EB as well as the folks at the Agency of Natural Resources who manage the residuals management program.
Well, get it over to us and we'll push it through. I mean, it's no big deal, but we got to have it to do it.
Yeah. And I hope, Senator Pearson, you weren't under the impression that I was telling you all the things. I wasn't putting up roadblocks. I'm not saying why we can't do this. I'm suggesting that while we're doing it, we cast a broader net.
Sure, I appreciate that. I don't mean to suggest you're creating roadblocks. We have found roadblocks created every step of the way as we have tried to do this for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it typically looks like, oh, well, you didn't think of this, or how are we going to handle that? And I guess my ask, and we'll reiterate it to Commissioner Walk next week, is tell us how we're getting to yes, because we're getting to yes, and we'd like it to be done well. And if I have anything to do with it, so that's where I'm coming from. And you're raising additional issues; they're valid issues. I guess I would just say, to the extent you can help us answer the issues you're raising, that would be tremendously helpful.
Well, and the other piece of that is if we are creating a residuals management program, incorporating these other pieces, and I've got a strategy on how to fund it that I will share with the committee.
Well, and next Thursday, both you and Peter Walker are going to be in the committee. So I don't know, I would expect you guys may want to chat before next Thursday and kind of have a little plan put together for us to move forward with, because probably if you don't have the following week, we'll put our own plan together and it may not work quite as well.
Yep, understood.
Yep. Okay, so do you have some more suggestions, Carrie?
Only that a residuals management program at the agency would take care of the food scrap issue, ag plastics, and PFAS chemicals. So minor program, and we would encourage you to sort of think about including soil amendments in the fertilizer registration and animal supplements in the feed registration. These are two pieces that are sort of currently falling through the cracks. 37 states currently do include registration of soil amendments, as it's just one more sort of piece to grab on to, and it could certainly fund this program. And my hope would be eventually that we're also dealing with ag plastics and ag plastic recycling in this residuals management program, but that doesn't need to be part of this legislation. It's just a future hope and goal.
Yeah. So are there questions from committee members? Anthony?
Yeah, I'm just a little unclear as to where the responsibility lies. So we're talking about making sure there's not plastics in what comes to the farm. I mean, who's responsible for seeing to it that happens? If let's say there's a package of Twinkies that's wrapped in plastic, is it going to be the responsibility of the store to make sure the plastic's not on the Twinkies anymore? Is it going to be somebody in between? Is it going to be the farmer who's ultimately responsible? I'm just curious where the responsibility lies in the kind of program that you're envisioning.
Yep. And Senator Polina, I think that really depends on where that Twinkie ultimately ends up. And I think it's managing the stream. If we are going to move that to a composting facility that's allowing chickens to forage on it, then that the person supplying the Twinkie becomes part of the feed chain, and FSMA would make it the supplier's responsibility to make sure.
So the farmer would not necessarily be threatened at coming under some kind of penalty because there was plastic was found on the farm.
Correct. Right now they are, as a composter, is their sort of responsibility. Well, it's a shared responsibility between them and the waste stream. And I know Carl Hammer, I'm sure you're familiar with Carl, but he did extensive training with the restaurants where he was picking up food scraps about what could go in and what couldn't. And I think some of that has been lost, but that was That was a model that they used for years. And Senator Polina, I remember asking, or you asking about BMP and cost share funding.
Right.
That if this, how that works right now is there's a list of practices that NRCS funds, and we can get Ryan Patch to come in and talk about that list. He's more familiar with it than I am, but any farm is able to sort of use that pick list of NRCS funded BMPs, and the agency then sort of cost shares. It's not a decision that's made at the agency. It's just a pick list of projects that NRCS will fund. And I know waste management is on that list, but are we calling this a waste or an ag input? And those are primarily centered around water quality and protecting water quality, but it's certainly a conversation that is worth having.
Thanks.
See, Eric earlier, Eric was saying that, you know, he had just a hard packed gravel pad and level fields. We don't want it on a side hill, but
Right.
he said that, you know, this compost is very good to prevent in preventing runoff. Like if you use it on your cornfields instead of manure, it settles and goes right into the ground. So I should think, you know, as long as we had some kind of an application that had to be approved, so that the soil or the spot that was going to be registered to put compost or compost processing was level and flat and of a good surface, it would even help prevent runoff, especially in the future when these landfills where it's been going, when they start breaking and opening up. So
yeah, that finished compost really acts like a sponge. It's a great product.
So there are other issues, Carrie, or we've got just a few more minutes, and we've got to get ready to go on the Senate floor.
Yep. No, but I will send sort of the written proposal that I just described to Linda, so she can put it on your website or at least share it with you all individually.
Yeah, has O'Grady been involved with any of this?
So we did send it to O'Grady last. Well, I believe you did get this bill out of the Senate and after crossover, and it did make it up to House Agriculture, and we did send House Ag and Mike O'Grady this proposal about what this residuals management program could look like, but I didn't. That's as far as it went. I never saw it drafted in any way.
It never got drafted.
No, and
Yeah.
House never took any testimony.
Yeah. Well, Michael's away right now, but if he doesn't get back, we'll pick up, I'm sure, a new drafting person. And but are you going to resend that language, Carrie? Is that what you're going to send, Linda?
Yes, I will.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, Chris?
Well, just a request that you do try to talk to Commissioner Walk before we're all in the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will.
You know, I don't know how closely he's been following it, so be grateful if you guys could do some advance work.
Yep. No, Kathy Jameson had been point, and I'd been talking with Kathy.
Yeah.
But we'll.
Well, anything else, guys? if you have anything that you'd like to have on the schedule for next week, I don't know if Linda's sent you one that we put together, but we've got one pretty well put together. But if there's something that you want to either add or delete from that, just let me know or give Linda a shout and she'll talk to me. But feel free to offer, any suggestions if you have some.
Very good. Thank you.
And thank you, Carrie, for your time this morning. But hopefully working all together, we'll get this done, this bill done this year.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay, so we'll see you folks in a few minutes on the Senate floor.
Yep. Thanks,
Yeah.
Bobby.